of the Ateneo. I am Dr. Inez Ponce de Leon, Associate Professor of the Department of Communication, here to welcome you to today's event. To begin, we call on Dr. Maria Asunta Cuyegkeng, Executive Director of the ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture, to provide the formal opening remarks. Dr. Cuyegkeng is a professor at the Department of Educational Leadership and Management here at the Ateneo de Manila University. Dr. Cuyegkeng.
Thank you, Ines. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on ASEAN Ecosystems and Environmental Education. When we were planning for the ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education way back in 2018, one of our major concerns was how ASEAN higher education institutions could somehow contribute to the development of a generation of young Asians who are more sensitive to the intimate link of human activity to our environment. The ASEAN region is home to some of the world's richest resources and ecosystems, and these need responsible stewards, especially those who will be involved in the running of the economies and our political and social institutions. The ecological education of these future generations should help them develop a sustainability mindset shown in their decision-making, lifestyle, and culture. As stated in Laudato Si of Pope Francis, there needs to be a distinctive way of looking at things, a way of thinking, policies, an educational program, a lifestyle, and a spirituality, close quote. This webinar is clearly a step in that direction. We are truly grateful to Dr. Aldrin Malyari for giving us an update on the state of Southeast Asian ecosystems. We cannot appropriately act if we do not know where we stand or swim. Our thanks to Dr. Alona Linatok, whose passion for biodiversity led us to this collaboration. Thank you for making that important connection between environmental education and communication. And to all our participants, we hope you can help us spread the word on how we can be good ASEAN citizens who will make wise choices as we go ahead with our human activities. We all look forward to this enriching afternoon. Thank you. Back to you, Ines.
Thank you so much, Mama Chu, for this welcome, and thank you too for the reminder. Yes, we do need to be more passionate about our planet, and it's not just about what we know, it's what we do with what we know. Now we will begin with our webinar. For those who have just come in, good afternoon once again. You are watching From Rivers to Streams, which marks the first event of AUN-EEC for this year. Again, I am your moderator, Dr. Inez Ponce de Leon, Associate Professor here at the Department of Communication at the Ateneo de Manila University, and I will be your moderator. Let's talk about the AUN-EEC. The AUN-EEC is the ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture. It seeks to develop a generation of Southeast Asians who will have the mindset and competencies to conserve and preserve the environment, even as they face the challenges of social change and economic growth. This year, the AUN-EEC has chosen to organize various events under the banner theme of Environmental Restoration and Reconciliation. This theme itself is situated against the broader setting of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which runs from 2021 to 2030. You will hear more about this theme and other coming events after today's open forum. Guided by this theme, the AUN-EEC believes that while environmental action must necessarily include the recovery and revival of ecosystems that have been damaged by past human activity, it must also look forward to the ability of human development to coexist, to commune with our environment. As such, the gap between everyday human activity and environmental concern continues to be bridged, and the calls for environmental action continue to sound louder by the day, not just from global organizations, but in our regions, our countries, and even in our immediate communities, such as our schools and our workplaces. However, as in many things, this much needed action needs to be grounded on the actual problem. Before we proceed with action, there should be a proper understanding of the state of our environment, especially here in Southeast Asia, one of the most biodiversity rich regions of the world. Our actions should be localized and contextualized to the actual conditions of this region. With the help of our two distinguished speakers here with us today, From Rivers and Streams hopes to provide that foothold for persons of any and all backgrounds seeking a starting point to learn about and to join this cause. To do this, our first talk will expose us to current environmental realities by answering the question of what is the state of ecosystems in the ASEAN region that many of us here today reside in? This question will explore both the beauty and threats to our region's ecosystems, as well as the progress made in line with restoration and conservation efforts. Then we will have our second talk, which will flow from these contexts to answer the question of how are these environmental facts and realities communicated to the general public in the ASEAN region? In the process, we will assess the strategies that work in promoting sustained environmental awareness and action among learners here in the ASEAN. Let's begin. Let's start with our first speaker for this afternoon. Neil Aldrin Malyari is a National Geographic explorer, the regional focal point of Southeast Asia Philippines of the World Commission on Protected Areas, an Ashoka Fellow, and a biodiversity conservation practitioner and advocate. He is the founder of a number of biodiversity conservation NGOs in the Philippines, including the Wildlife Conservation Society of the Philippines and the Center for Conservation Innovations Philippines, where he now serves as president. Dr. Malyari completed his undergraduate degree from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and his PhD from Manchester Metropolitan University in the United Kingdom. He has more than 40 scientific publications under his belt, including 2 award-winning and seminal conservation books, Threatened Birds of the Philippines and Key Conservation Sites in the Philippines. Dr. Malyari is concurrently the ecologist of the USAID Sustainable Interventions for Biodiversity, Oceans and Landscapes, or the CIBOL project, and an ecology professor at the De La Salle University and the Far Eastern University of the Philippines. In these engagements, he focuses on strengthening conservation science and conservation capacities of future leaders to improve conservation practice. Let's allow Dr. Malyari to provide us with a picture of the state of ASEAN ecosystems. We welcome, with a virtual round of applause, to the AUN-EEC virtual stage, Dr. Neil Aldrin D. Malyari.
Maraming salamat. Good afternoon, everyone. Virtually, of course. I'd like to share my screen if that's possible. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yan, sige. Yeah, thank you very much for the kind invitation and the introduction. I'd like to breeze through ecosystems in peril. Unfortunately, this afternoon, I won't give you, I won't deal with good news, but medyo pessimistic yata itong aking talk this afternoon, but let's see how it goes. No, as said in the introduction, I head the Center for Conservation Innovation. We are a conservation NGO, 7 years old now, and about 60 people strong, working across the country, looking for different ways of delivering conservation across the country and across the region. Although my talk would be focusing on the Philippines, let's look at the Philippines as a microcosm of the ASEAN region. In this case, the Philippines is a mega diversity country, and if you the analogy I have here is it's a modern Noah's Ark. Imagine the world divided up into 17 or 18 different parts. Iba sa Noah's Ark story, all animals, they were gathered in pairs. So after the flood, they can recolonize the earth. If we were to secure unique biodiversity across the globe, 1/18 or one part of that arc is the Philippines. So if we sink and we obliterate all of our biodiversity, we lose 1/17 or 1/18 of all the unique global biodiversity of the world. So that's how important the Philippines is. And this is due to the fact that the Philippines is, it's composed of more than 7,100 islands during high tide, and who knows how many more during low tide. And because of so many islands, many of these are isolated oceanic islands, never been connected to Asia mainland since the Pleistocene period, brought forth diverse landscapes, diverse ecosystems, and diverse habitats. So because of that, because of the variety of habitats, the variety of or diversity of habitats and ecosystems, tapos basag-basag na islands, we have one of the most, the highest, in fact, one of the highest endemism across in the world. No? And here you'll see this graphic showing you basic statistics. So the Philippines really is such an important country in terms of biodiversity, alongside its other ASEAN neighbors. It is at the apex of the Coral Triangle, which includes ASEAN member states and Australia, world's highest marine biodiversity, and close to 5,000 identified species of marine plants and animals. So, ang sobrang diverse ng Pilipinas. No? I am a conservation biologist, and for me, biodiversity is my barometer. So please forgive me if I will be focused on biodiversity to represent this to give you a report on ecosystems as they represent many of these ecosystems. As you know, many of these species, endemic and threatened, are good indicators of the quality of water and extent of forest ecosystems, or really indicators of improving or worsening quality and extent of ecosystems that these animals or plants represent. And to some degree, many of these species also typify our identity as Filipinos. Katulad nitong Philippine eagle, ating national bird. It's a sad fact that the Philippine eagle has a 50% chance of extinction in the next 5 years, being our national bird at the brink of extinction. Nakakahiya naman yata yun. So if you look at biodiversity and look at and try to reflect and understand the different drivers of change of all of our ecosystems, as we all know, birds are great indicators of the different ecosystems in the Philippines and ASEAN. You would see at a global level a lot of these anthropogenic and natural drivers of extinction are present, from expanding agriculture to logging to mining, hunting and trapping, conversion of natural ecosystems to residential and commercial, and so on. And of course, lest we forget climate change and severe weather. 34% of the list of globally threatened species are affected by climate change and severe weather events. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. If you look at the right side of this slide, you see the 10 countries or territories with the greatest number of globally threatened bird species, again, representing many ecosystems across the Philippines and across ASEAN. You'll notice that 2 ASEAN member states are in this top 10 list, Indonesia and Philippines. But if you compare the Philippines with the rest of these countries, Brazil, where you have Amazonia, Brazil is 26 times larger than us. Indonesia and the United States of America, they have almost equal size in terms of if you overlay them, overlay their maps, no? So kulangot lang ang Pilipinas based on compared to these other countries. What I'm trying to say is that species per unit area, Philippines comes #1 in this list. The sad reality is that in terms of forest integrity, a lot of these key biodiversity areas that we have identified, especially in Asia, Southeast Asia, a lot of these areas, which are important for the long-term survival of many bird species or biodiversity for that matter, are in unfavorable condition. Kita niyo yung Asia, no? Yung lahat ng mga KBAs. Almost all of the KBAs are in medium forest integrity, or in their state of continuing state of degradation. Given that, if you look at zooming in on the Philippines, there are 2 key ecosystems that are important for the survival of threatened species of birds in the Philippines. First would be the forest and wetlands. And maybe you're sick and tired of seeing this graphic shows the decline of Philippine forests over the last 100 years. We're now down to less than 20%. Not all threatened species or not all species require the same space or require the same habitat. In this case, just to illustrate, two kingfisher species, one would need a larger area to survive, and some and the other species, of Casinia Seix argentatus, doesn't need a large tract of ecosystem to survive. And the others would have the same, similar patterns of varying degrees and varying sizes and varying requirements to survive. So in this case, three species under the same genus of Shorea, yung apitong, red lawaan, and white lawaan, they would have different requirements to survive, no? And so on. So what I've done is to overlay 18 of these requirements of survival for many species, or 18 species at that, to show you for Mindanao, where are those areas that that this species need to survive in the long term. So makita nyo, red would have been is where the species pack, no? And yellow is moderate. So across, you will notice in this map that across Mindanao, it seems that you have higher bang for the buck if you protect Eastern Mindanao Biodiversity Corridor. So if we fail in protecting this species, 18 species at that, in this region here, forget about the long-term survival of 18 threatened species of birds, herbs, and trees in Eastern Mindanao, or in Mindanao biogeographic region. These species survival envelopes, by the way, coincide with the remaining natural forest. So inseparable yung forest and your biodiversity, unique biodiversity in the Philippines. Let's step back a bit and to project the historical extent or survival envelopes of many of these species in 1988. So in theory, mukhang most of Mindanao would have been a haven for all of these species. No? But fast forward natin by 2010, did you see what happened there? A lot of these survival envelopes or suitable habitats for this 18 or 21 threatened species have contracted and has degraded. So really, these ecosystems as represented by these species are now in peril. Unfortunately, where you have your packing of your threatened species in Eastern Mindanao are also, incidentally, yan din yung timber corridor ng Pilipinas. So that gives you an idea what your government, government pala natin, kung ano yung kanyang priorities, no? And incidentally, all of these areas na in magenta or purple, yan yung mga key biodiversity areas, are also subjected to intense mining activities. So again, gives you an idea of the sort of peril that many of these ecosystems from the species, species and ecosystems present. And my friends, it's not just Eastern Mindanao. It's happening across the country, and it's happening across also across the region. There's shrinking of all these natural habitats, natural ecosystems that provide, that spell the long-term survival of many species in the Philippines and globally. When we had COVID, before COVID, pinag-usapan natin to yung climate emergency and biodiversity, imminent biodiversity collapse. But because of COVID, our vista has been obscured. Our vista of these two emergencies have been obscured. Mukhang naging forgotten emergencies na sila, no? But as we emerge from our isolation and COVID, I hope that we, when we talk about education and awareness, let's start taking out this COVID and recession of obscuring our vista of the looming crisis that we have for many of our ecosystems in the Philippines. Because of COVID, we've forgotten how we are destroying a lot of our natural ecosystems, and this is driven by poverty, of course. And I don't know if you can still remember Ondoy. This was taken on Ondoy, which again threatens a lot of our livelihood, or has threatened our livelihood. Just to give you, remind us of the devastation of this freak or the deleterious effects of climate change because of these freak weather events. I don't know if you still remember this happening. But on recent times, December 2021, Ondoy happened. And this is just to give you a flavor of the results that we've from our recent analysis and study of Palawan. This is half of Palawan now. This is northern Palawan, and it's covering about more than 222,000 hectares of forest, which constitutes 48% of the landscape. No, after Odette, and this is what happened. We've lost 25,000 hectares of forest. That's about 57% damage. And if you talk up, if you ask me how much is the emission because of Odette for just one day, the total emission in our calculations round about 800 million metric tons of CO2e emitted because we've lost more than 125,000 hectares of forest. And this is how our last frontier looks like. At least half of it, more than half of its forest is gone and converted to something else. And what is the impact on biodiversity? Here you can see on the left is the pre-Odette endemic to Palawan, and because of Odette, it has been isolated, and its long-term survival is hanging in the balance. And because of Odette, we have lots of community displacement as well. So to wrap this up, after Odette, mukhang business as usual na eh. But because we've done this research, we've made it a point to make government authority or the mandates to realize that we need nature also to survive, as we report damage to properties and basic services. Sana rin nagre-report tayo damage to ecosystems and ecosystem services. If not, many of us would have been happy in the urban areas and would have been detached from the bigger picture. And these climate-induced disasters have been happening since 1990s and happening every day. This is Ormoc in the 1990s, and it's happening everywhere. This can be anywhere, not just Ormoc. Problem, my friends, is that nature does not discern between those who planted trees and those who have logged forests. And perhaps we may not have realized the link of nature and with the economic viability. Tingin natin nature's outside and we're not part of nature. And because of that, we've missed the link between nature and our survival. Hopefully, in the future, we go beyond clean and green. Di lang dapat ang tawag dito, basura, or beyond planting trees. The hope is that we move towards community-based habitat rehabilitation to create a public demand for habitat protection, because we elect people in government, but obviously habitat protection is not part of their agenda. And hopefully we can invigorate bayanihan to save what is left of our natural ecosystems. The conservation of natural resources via habitat restoration, protected areas should be part of government policy, and that we take them to account. Sa ngayon, hindi pa yata yan priority. So that we can make a vital link between nature and our survival and promising families a better future. To me, the issue of biodiversity loss and loss of ecosystems and ecosystem services is all about social justice too. As long as we see, children like this and we paying for water that is really free, I think we've been doing a disservice to ecosystems and ecosystem services. So yun lang po muna. I don't have enough time, but I can, if you would allow me, just give you some results of 3 minutes lang siguro ito. We did an online survey last at the height of the pandemic for 4,500 respondents. So maganda yung demographics niya. 59% are female, 69% are between 19 to 40 years old. So 89% niyan ay nakabot ng tertiary education. And we asked the question, what is your biggest concern with the country's environment? So top of mind, 38% is pollution. 21% is forest loss, climate change, 10%. Ang sector na ginagalawan ko, biodiversity loss, is only 4%. So mind share for biodiversity loss and environmental degradation is very low compared to pollution. No? And when you try to ask the respondents to rank these, climate change ang lumalabas pero mataas pa rin ang pollution, and the rest, as you can see, biodiversity loss has a good share. No? But more importantly, when we ask the perception of the respondents on how certain we are in the future, 2050, mataas yung pessimism, no? More than half believe the future looks bleak in terms of basic necessities. In fact, yung I don't know, dapat nasa no answer yan, di ba? Only 18% said we will have enough food, water, and space or shelter for Filipinos in the 2050s. Tapos 3 out of 5 respondents are not confident that we will have clean air by 2050. Mataas pa rin yung ano na yung pessimism that there will be still forests in 2050. Yung I don't know na 27% nasa no pa rin yan, di ba? So mas marami pa rin yung no. Pessimism in terms of the quality of life in the Philippines, if it will improve by 2050, mukhang majority, mas mataas, 80%, says it will not improve. So if you look at the priority solutions, when we ask the general public, mukhang marami, as you can see in your screen, from smarter enforcement of laws, nandun pa rin yung waste reduction management, etc., as you can see in your screen. But what you will notice is that all of these are nature positive solutions. No? And so there must be, we can use this as a springboard, I hope. So palagi namin sinasabi, we will not be okay, or we are not okay if nature is not okay. And last hirit ko, and this is over to you, Ms. Alona, that I think one of our greatest foes, problems in the Philippines and in ASEAN is this looming ecological amnesia. Because the generations now and succeeding generations expect to see less of nature because their experience has been of a depleted world. So hopefully with your conversation or conversations that will ensue after this, that we also help fight ecological amnesia. Sabi nga nila, paano mo mamahalin ng isang bagay kung hindi mo kilala? So let's start learning about nature and understanding that we will not be okay if nature is not okay. Salamat po, magandang hapon sa ating lahat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malyari, for your presentation. I'm sure that a lot of you have questions, not just about the findings, but their implications. So please make sure that if you have any questions, send them through the Zoom chat, and we will attend to them in the open forum later. As a reminder, please avoid sending private messages to our presenters, as they will not have the chance to read these questions and comments during their talk. So again, if you've just entered, please type in your questions in public on the Zoom chat. Once again, thank you, Dr. Malyari. And as Dr. Malyari said, this is over to Dr. Linato. Our second speaker is Dr. Alona Linatok, who is currently an associate professor at the Department of Forest Biological Sciences of the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. She is an active member of the Society of Filipino Foresters, Forest and Natural Resources Research Society of the Philippines, and the Society of Conservation Biology. She is also a member of the editorial board of the Journal of Tropical Biodiversity and Biotechnology of the Universitas Gadjah Mada, Indonesia, and is a visiting researcher at the Center of Research on Sustainable Uses of Natural Resources at the University Tun Hussein on Malaysia. Dr. Linatok obtained her Bachelor of Science in Forestry from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños in 1995, her Master of Science in Forest Botany from the University Putra, Malaysia in 2000, and her PhD in Forest Physiology from the University Malaysia Sabah in 2009. Prior to returning to the Philippines in 2022, Dr. Linatok served at the University Tun Hussein on Malaysia since 2009, where she helped to establish 2 programs: the Bachelor of Science in Biodiversity and Conservation, with the honors, and Master of Science in Biodiversity Conservation. As an educator, Dr. Linatok advocates for humanizing science and tapping indigenous ecological knowledge in pursuit of more informed, science-based decisions in society. Let's now talk environmental communication and education in the ASEAN and give a warm welcome on our virtual stage to Dr. Alona Linatok.
Thank you very much. Blessed good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to our dear moderator, Dr. Ines. Let me share my screen. I hope you all can see my screen. So first of all, I would like to express my sincerest thanks to the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, specifically to the ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture for inviting me to share some thoughts about environmental education and communication in Southeast Asia. To Dr. Achut, Dr. Eman, Sir Javi, Ma'am Jean, and the rest of the AIS team, thank you very much. And I would also like to acknowledge my fellow speaker, Dr. Neil. I don't know if I can answer a question, but I will try to. And to our guests in this webinar from, I think, Malaysia, Indonesia, and from other parts of the ASEAN. So I'll try to speak English all throughout the presentation. So what I will be sharing with you this afternoon are some thoughts and experience I had pertaining to environmental education and communication in Southeast Asia. To give us all some background, the creation of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations through the 1967 Bangkok Declaration had the original 5 member countries, namely Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand, forged on economic cooperation and aimed to improve the welfare of the people in the region. It was then joined by other member states, including Brunei Darussalam in 1984, Vietnam in 1995, Laos PDR and Myanmar in 1997, and Cambodia in 1999. A decade after its creation in 1978, the ASEAN cooperation in the field of environment was institutionalized through the establishment of the ASEAN Experts Group on the Environment, or AEGE, under the ASEAN Committee on Science and Technology. In 1989, AEGE was eventually elevated to becoming the now known ASEAN Senior Officials on Environment, or the ASEAN. Under ASEAN, 3 working groups were formed: the Working Group on Nature Conservation and Biodiversity, chaired by the Philippines, the Working Group on Coastal and Marine Environment, chaired by Thailand, and the Working Group on Multilateral Environmental Agreements, chaired by Malaysia. In addition, the HAZE Technical Task Force, chaired by Indonesia, was also established to operationalize and implement the measures recommended in the ASEAN Cooperation Plan on Transboundary Pollution relating to atmospheric pollution, which has now evolved into the Regional HAZE Action Plan. The formal take of the ASEAN on environmental education began in the late 70s. This is in compliance to the UNEP's recommendation for the ASEAN to hold a workshop on postgraduate environmental education, instituting a network of universities in the region for developing and conducting postgraduate integrated environment education program. The drafting of the action plan on environmental education and training for ASEAN countries was a turning point in recognizing the need to develop curricula for tertiary level environmental education and training on issues pertaining to environmental economics, toxic chemicals, and hazardous waste, and coastal management, among others. From then on, countless initiatives by ASEAN member states become critical in ensuring that environmental education in the region remains a top priority in formal education. So much progress has been made since then that every ASEAN member state has or is currently implementing comprehensive programs promoting environmental education as well as communicating conservation of biodiversity. We may need another sessions, perhaps, and series of webinars to go through all of this. However, as much as everyone present today is aware, and Dr. Malyari has clearly presented, we are acknowledging the current situation of our environment, and we beg to ask why that despite all the institutionalized excellent policies and guidelines on environmental education, are we still suffering from different environmental problems, and even more complex problems are continuously unraveling. As a society, as an individual, what are we doing to improve the situation? What could have we done more to address the situation actively or otherwise? Do all of us understand the causes of environmental problems? Before we delve further into the role of environmental education and communication, let's have some recap on what the major environmental issues are being faced by the ASEAN region. First and foremost is population growth. As of 2020, we are nearly 700 million people spread over the land area of 4.5 million square kilometers. Currently, The ASEAN region, all ASEAN member countries combined, has the largest population in the world after China and India. The world's fourth most populous country is our neighbor, Indonesia, with more than 270 million population. Coupled with population growth is the increasing demand for food, water, and other necessities. This results to increasing cases of pollution of our land, water, and air, deforestation, land conversion, loss of habitat, land degradation, proliferation of invasive alien species, overharvesting, and overexploitation of terrestrial and marine resources, particularly overfishing, and of course, global warming and climate change. Even closer to home are these events or disasters exacerbated by our own doings. Early this year, the flood in Malaysia, particularly in the southern part of peninsular Malaysia, nearly 50,000 people have been affected. Floods, not unusual during the annual monsoon season, which actually takes place between November and March, but in recent years, this year more specifically, Malaysia has endured series of severe floods, which experts say are the result of overdevelopment, deforestation, and conversion to monocrop plantations, and of course, the changing climate. North to peninsular Malaysia, the neighboring Thailand is currently enduring haze caused by forest fires, which nearly 2 million people are hospitalized due to respiratory-related illnesses caused by severe air pollution. The forest fires have also spread to borders of neighboring Myanmar and Laos, and the list of environmental problems goes on and on. Our oceans, even how remote they can be, are obviously not spared from the impacts of what we are doing on land. Unfortunately, the Philippines tops the world's list of highest ocean plastic polluters. According to the Visual Capitalist, millions of metric tons of plastics end up in our oceans. These plastics actually are remains of the plastic that have been recycled, incinerated, or discarded into landfills. The Philippines, being an archipelago of over 7,000 islands, with 36,289 kilometer coastline and 4,820 plastic emitting rivers, is estimated to emit 35% of the ocean's plastic. Of the top 10, only Brazil, with 1,240 rivers, including the Amazon, was the only non-Asian country included. These are the kinds of rivers we commonly see. Rivers that are very accessible to humans are the most polluted and need no rocket science to prove. However, the extent of pollution spreads hundreds of kilometers away from the point source. Rivers are so-called source of life. Ironically, are being deprived of it due to our own doings. Again, let me ask these questions. What are we doing to improve the situation? What could we do more to address the situation? Does everyone have a role to play, or is it only the responsibility of the authority to protect, to care, and conserve our environment? It has been insinuated that one of the major causes of environmental problems are the people, ourselves. Our excessive demand for food, water, and everything that will make our life comfortable, our reliance to everything disposable, our consumerism. Acknowledging this, why not turn the tide by making ourselves as part of the solution instead? I'm not sure if you have noticed the title of this webinar, From Rivers to Stream, a situationary and ASEAN ecosystem in environmental communication. Again, from rivers to stream. In the natural environment, specifically, if we are going to look at a watershed or a catchment area, streams, or technically called tributaries, are the channels that feed water into the main river. Streams or tributaries are located upstream, while water flows naturally downstream into the main river, then into the estuaries, and eventually to lakes and oceans. Call it metaphor if you will. If the river represents the mainstream environmental education and the streams are the different sectors of society of which environmental education should be disseminated to, it is literally and figuratively an upstream, uphill battle. In this case, we need not only strong science-based solutions, but a more humanistic and practical approach. The more we travel into the digital age, the more navigating through all these environmental issues become more challenging. Why? Because our society tends to lose contact with the natural world. We are so engrossed with what we can learn and experience online, using the latest technology to the point that our appreciation of the natural world is taken for granted or replaced by artificial intelligence or augmented reality, the metaverse, the alternate reality. How many of us here can name a tree other than the ones used in our landscaped gardens? Or why do we plant trees in the first place? Or how many of us here can see that insects have ecological importance and not to be treated as pests and disease-causing organisms? Or perhaps only after coming back from these long weekend getaways, we get to appreciate nature or environment, and I hope so. Knowing the populace, environmental education can be more effective if we implement techniques and approaches suitable to our target groups. We can define our target group by age, gender, or even their background. It is good to know that literacy rate in ASEAN is very high. The enrollment rate in primary education is also very high. Let us take advantage of this scenario to promote environmental literacy. Environmental education is institutionalized and formalized in school curricula in the ASEAN, both in primary and secondary education. However, it is not a plain subject like English or math, but it is incorporated in science, geography, and even social studies. Let us take a step back and assess how effective are these in ensuring us, our students, the citizens in general, are inculcated with proper education about the environment that they can apply this in their daily lives. Are teachers well equipped and well trained to teach these topics in environmental education? How do we select teachers for this purpose? We have met teachers who have deep interest and commitment to produce environmentally literate students. However, there are also those who gave impression that this is just another task given to them and they are not well equipped to deliver environmental education topics despite their trainings and course materials provided. How about the strategies and approaches? Experiential and problem-based learning are more suitable, but then the student learning time is limited and usually devoted to the so-called core subjects. How about the shift to blended learning? How does online classes emphasize environmental education? How are the learning objectives assessed? Is it exam-oriented or does it apply continuous assessment or none at all? Regardless, let's train them young. The picture is a bit different if we look at tertiary education. Many institutions of higher learnings have designed undergraduate and postgraduate programs along the discipline of environmental education. In this case, young individuals are voluntarily choosing, well, hopefully, to study these programs and pursue their careers in it. Many are engaged, driven by their passion of protecting the environment, saving the earth. Research projects, dissertations, and theses are even aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. But then we still have lingering questions. How are these noble programs, the pursuit of deep understanding of our environment, can reach the policymakers, the lawmakers, those who are responsible in making critical decisions of which would have direct and indirect impacts to the environment? While having this formal environmental education program from primary to tertiary levels are very ideal, the fact that much of our environmental problems does not come from individual action, but a product of our collective lifestyle, our pursuit of economic development, our culture, our consumerism, then again, we have to step back and assess what could we do more? What can we do more to have an effective change of mindset in favor of protecting, conserving, and caring for our environment? How can we communicate this to the general public? In one of the meetings of the Conference of Parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity held in Montreal, Canada in 2014, Dr. Stanley Asa of the University of Washington boldly stated that awareness does not make people change their behaviors. Instead, realign message with people's existing values. This, of course, is highly debatable, especially because values are relative to the society, relative to an individual. What I will be sharing next are some of the programs and activities me and my team in Malaysia have embarked on as far as environmental education is concerned and the learning takeaways after each program has been conducted. Japanese people value their environment very much. Those of you who have been to Japan can probably help but notice and compare how clean and organized it is in Japan, with the impeccable discipline of the people, beginning from their formal. Still many aspects of the environment that they are willing to learn, and this is where understanding of the tropical ecosystem comes in. Guided by the local experts and indigenous people, these Japanese high school students embark on a week-long field trip to remote tropical rainforests of Malaysia, both in Peninsular and in Borneo, to understand the intricacies and complexities of tropical rainforests, including the threats these ecosystems are facing. Threats like land use change, overharvesting, overexploitation, pollution, and even the erosion of traditional knowledge. What is even more interesting is the traditional ecological knowledge shared by the indigenous people, how their lives are intricately connected with nature, including the uses of herbal medicines and other traditional practices. We, from the university, take initiatives by scientifically validating and documenting these claims. For example, their uses of specific plants to treat tuberculosis and malaria were further investigated back in the lab. These plants indeed contain phytochemicals that exhibit positive reaction against mycobacteria and plasmodium, among others. Just to emphasize, we are also very careful when we bring outsiders to the village. There are certain procedures involved when approaching the indigenous people and learn about their traditional knowledge. We are strictly guided by the access and benefit sharing protocol set by the national government based on the Convention on Biological Diversity. We are very mindful of the federal and state laws protecting the right of the indigenous people. The continuous development poses threat to this traditional knowledge, as the younger generations are leaning toward the modern life, resulting to erosion of this natural and cultural heritage. It is in this informal setting that we can promote environmental education and communicate the importance of biodiversity to our lives. We make them understand that whatever is happening in this side of the world, the impact is global, reaching even the remotest part of the planet. Likewise, this program also brings new learnings to Malaysian students by engaging and interacting with students from different countries. Malaysian students are given fresh perspective of how outsiders can see and value the nature they almost take for granted, as well as the situations happening outside their home country. It is through this kind of program that we are providing them with the opportunity to learn outside the four corners of their rooms. The world is their classroom. Even before COVID-19 pandemic hit the world, Malaysian and American students are already engaged in a collaborative online learning since 2016. Students from both countries are engaged in an 11-module program that they need to complete within the semester. Through programs like this, without burning a hole in their pockets, they still get to learn the life, the culture, and the biodiversity of each country. To summarize, the traditional conservation paradigm of leaving nature alone can be unrealistic and counterproductive, especially in today's time of rapidly ecosystem change. What we need is to make everyone understand that all of us have responsibility. Each one of us is part of the solution. It may not be easy or perhaps nearly impossible to nurture the culture of altruism. However, we can be close to that by paying attention to the level of knowledge, values, and action through effective environmental education and communication. Whatever our profession or our background may be, all of us here in this event may continue to seek our target audience. Let us be advocates of environmental education. Experiential learning through exchange programs offer different learning opportunity for our students, wherein we groom individuals with strong environmental consciousness, environmental literacy, and accountability, regardless of their age, gender, and nationality. Learning transcends classrooms. Understanding about the life and culture of indigenous people is one of the excellent means to educate us about our natural and cultural heritage. Let us also take advantage of the power of social media. Let us influence our policymakers, our lawmakers. And finally, let's make environmental education hopefully our way of life. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Linatok, for that presentation. And again, thank you to our presenters today for being a part of this event. Now, we're going to continue the conversation and we will be moving to our open forum where members of our audience may pose questions to our pair of speakers. Before I read the first set of questions that arrived through chat, I am going to give just another reminder. If you are present here in Zoom, you can drop your questions in the Zoom chat, or you can also privately message your question to our Zoom account. That's I'm tempted to say factorial AUN-EEC under Q&A. That's exclamation point AUN-EEC underscore Q&A. Please avoid sending private messages to our presenters because they can't see these messages right now and they might not be able to respond to you. All right then. So we have our first question and this was sent away earlier. So I'm going to direct this to Dr. Malyari. Do you think how can sustainable and responsible mining practices and renewable energy resources for economic development be established while conserving biological diversity?
Thank you for that wonderful question. I believe, pang Miss Universe, ano, well, I think there needs to be a change in the policy, one on EIAs. I mean, the way things are done in the Philippines is that EIAs are, done haphazardly. Tapos, they spend maybe maybe two weeks in the field, and it's based only on presence absence. No? So when they say, for example, they look for the Philippine eagle, and in that mining site, they say they didn't see the Philippine eagle, then you can blast it to bits. No? So there needs to be a change in the way we measure nature, sukat ng kalikasan, to change that. Second, once we've done that, we need to go through the mitigation hierarchy. The first port of call, avoid as much as possible. If we cannot, after avoiding, you minimize, and then after minimizing, you have to rehabilitate. No? After going through those steps, only then can you go to compensation or offsets. Kasi sa ngayon, in current practice, offset na kagad. So the way that EIAs are done are sort of a license to kill. No? And so we can have mining and other economic activities so long as we create that safe operating space, both for biodiversity and us as humans that rely on ecosystem services that these industries will destroy. Does that answer? Is that a fair answer to your question?
The person who asked it was Nathan Solibaga from UP Diliman. So I hope that answered the question. I think it did. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a comment. Wonderful talk from Dr. Aldrin, says Harold Buenavida from Capital State University. He says he admires the work that you do in CCIPH, especially with integrating technology and conservation initiatives with modeling and species distribution studies. Amazing work. He would like to ask, what do you think would be the greatest challenge for us conservationists post-pandemic? And what would be the future directions of biodiversity conservation and education in the country? Thank you in advance and more power.
Again, thank you for that wonderful question. I believe. So yeah, I think the biggest challenge now, as I said in my last sort of piece, is ecological amnesia. Yeah, there's shifting baselines, and that's a big challenge in itself. And the big challenge also is communicating our science and getting our science into at the core of decision making in government. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about forest degradation, it's not just people who plugging, it's almost always that the communities are to be blamed. But really, the driver of deforestation, habitat loss, or land use change is not driven by communities. It's driven by national policies or local policies. So the biggest challenge for us is to transform decision makers to, you know, to get our science to inform their decisions. Because without science and without conscience, we will all be driven by just economics. And mind you, economics and ecology, there's that intense intersectionality of ecology and economics. Ang root word niya is eco. So parehong-pareho siya. And same as science and conscience. Science is the root word. So yeah, that's the biggest challenge. Fight ecological amnesia.
All right, thank you. Fight ecological amnesia, or amnesia for everything, because apparently everyone has amnesia for so many things. Thank you so much, Dr. Aldrin. We now turn over to Dr. Linato with a question for Aldwin Silfavan of ISAT University. What could be the most effective mechanism to reduce the Philippines' contribution to ocean plastic pollution? It's so silly that we take all the blame for being the #1 country contributing to ocean plastic pollution, because for all we know that it's the developed countries that dump their plastic wastes into our shores and the shores of Southeast Asia through cargo shipping. And it's so sad that we take it as business.
Yeah, thank you. I was reading that question and it's quite challenging to us. And I don't want to sound so mataray with my answer, but let me just say it in a way that probably it's a fact. And there are data showing that we are emitting plastics to the oceans. Regardless, we are the #1, we are the least emitters, we are still. And we cannot deny the fact when we look at our rivers, how polluted are they? Where will they go? In the ocean. So, I mean, it's no longer a question of what rank are we? But yeah, the question is very difficult to answer. It's very simple. What can we do? We can do a lot. I mean, just a simple discipline will take us a long way. Just a simple, don't throw this, don't throw that in, in places where this cannot be collected, then that's already a good practice for us. The thing with not only in the Philippines, but I'm also observing this with other ASEAN countries. The thing is, we rely so much on people collecting the rubbish for us. And I think we should start from that kind of thinking. I throw away, I keep my house clean, I put my rubbish away, and I just let somebody, I pay, the community pays to collect the rubbish for me. So my house is clean, but where are these going to be thrown? In the landfill? To be incinerated? I don't know. Will I care? If I don't have environmental conscience, I won't care. As long as my house is clean of rubbish, I don't care where the rubbish people will bring it, But these are these rubbish are very difficult to decompose. It will take years. So the very first thing we should do is to avoid producing those. Then, for those who are throwing the ships, the ships that are carrying and throwing in the middle of the ocean, I think we should be more. I mean, if we can just have a louder voice to advocate whoever, because if it's in the ocean, then it's already outside our territory, and it's very difficult to control that. But again, probably very, very ambitious, very ideal. Awareness also, again, is the key. It will still take probably many, many, many years to change our mindset about how we produce, how we throw, how we accumulate rubbish or garbage. But the bottom line is we should start with ourselves, and the environment will follow.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alona. We still have another question. This time it's from Harold. Oh, I'm sorry. Harold, yes, from Harold Benavida of Capi State. Very meaningful talk. Thank you, Dr. Alona. I would just like to ask, to what extent has the alarming disconnect between modern students and nature contributed to their apathy toward environmental issues, and what urgent measures can be taken to restore their connections with nature and instill a sense of responsibility toward the planet? Thank you.
I'll give one example. We had this program in Sabah. That was when I was still doing my PhD, and that was many, many years ago. And we had these school children participating in our program, and we had set up a camp, 2-night camp for them. And one of the activities we asked them is, could you please draw certain animals? We will just ask them to sketch certain animals, just for us to know how much do they know about, those animals, not even in the wild, but those animals that are just very common for them to see. We asked them to draw chicken, and instead of drawing chicken, they draw drumstick chicken. And when we ask why, what is this? Because they don't know how chicken looks like. So I think with that example, you can form your own, hypothesis on how much disconnect we have. The thing is, I saw in one of the comments, and a very good point, it should start in the household. We cannot just depend on school to teach everything to our children. Because what students learn, I know this with my children, what do they learn in school? When they go back, they forget. But something that I teach them from home, they can bring to the school. So it's for us who are the parents in here, going to be parents, please take it upon yourselves also to start educating your children, our children, about environment. Let's start from our home. Let's start from our household. We just don't depend to our teachers to teach them environmental literacy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lenato. That is a good reminder, because a lot of these morals, cultures, they all start in the home, and it's not just the environment. It's a very complex web of knowledge that should start in the home. It should not be entirely dependent on the educational system, regardless of age. We do have a question for both of you. So anyone can answer this. It's from an anonymous sender. Will the Philippines ever have order? Being ingrained in Ateneo, will our politicians ever be awakened to seriously make laws for our planet and for the future? I'm sorry, I'm not sure what this question is asking. It might be more of a comment, but I think in general, it's really, will our politicians ever be awakened? I wish I could answer this right now by saying no, but will they ever be awakened to seriously make laws for our planets and for the future, such as by rationing water for each person or by mandating electric cars by 2025? I think politicians in the Philippines, your views on this?
Well, I'll start siguro. One, just a rejoinder to Doc Alona's comment on education. In my previous incarnation, we did a lot of teacher training on mainstreaming biodiversity in the school curriculum. No? And in all of those workshops, we've ran maybe more than 100 workshops on teachers, and our starting exercise is to ask teachers to name an animal that begins with the first letter of their names. So almost always we will start with the letter A, aardvark, and end with the letter Z or Z, zebra or zebra. But no one would say alimukon, alamid, bayawak, and so on. So the lesson we got from that experience is that how can you love something if you don't know it? So most of our children would know your African animals or mammals first before they get to understand or know Philippine wildlife. So paano mo mamahalin ang hindi mo kilala, no? So it starts with knowing and then understanding and then love. On the question of because it's our fault that we elect politicians that do not have environment or conservation as their agenda. We vote based on personalities, popularity, popular vote, and we do not we are not creating that public demand for conservation of ecosystems and ecosystems integrity, because there's a major flaw in the way we account for nature. For example, GDP is based only on products and services, the fish that we get from the sea, timber that we get from forests, and minerals that we get from the land. But we don't value in the GDP fresh air that we breathe, water that's provided. That's not part of the GDP. So the way we value and measure nature is also flawed. So if that is not the case, if that is the case, then how can you put that in the august halls of policy making? If it starts from the home, there's no understanding of what biodiversity or Philippine or ASEAN biodiversity is. So it doesn't. If you don't know it, you can't love it. And if you don't create that public demand in the public plate or the plate of public opinion, then it won't figure in policy in the halls of your politician. Thank you.
Ma'am Alona, you can answer the question as well.
Yeah, thank you. I agree very much with Doc Aldrin that we have to demand it from the politicians, and who vote for them? Us. So there's nothing. It's very difficult to demand something if we don't know what are those, or if the politicians are not aware of what are the expectations from them other than bringing jobs, then what can we expect from them? And if I would say it's really the bureaucracy, that's one of our biggest problem. It's how our government is structured is not really the problem, but one of the contributing factors why we don't have progressive laws and policies on environment. Let me just give you an example. I think I have colleagues here who can also agree or probably add more to what will I say. We have the forestry law, which when I was studying in the 1990s, it was already the law and it has not been amended, but it has already been submitted or passed to the Congress. And it has just been sitting there for we don't know how many years. We don't know how many different DNR secretaries have passed, and it has not been, approved. And what is the reason? We are deliberating. We are suggesting all the reasons why they cannot amend the Forestry Act, and to the point that we are very very pessimistic and very, very bad in thinking that because it is taking away their sources of income if they will approve it, because it will there will no longer be, loopholes that they can run around it to, for their own advantage. So we come to a point to that. But overall, I think it's the bureaucratic system. It's so difficult. Even if we know how good the law, the amendments would be, it's still very difficult. And I don't know, I cannot give you an answer why is that difficult.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I do agree that it's a much more complex problem than just the law in and of itself. These laws exist in a much larger scheme of bureaucracy, culture, and things that we've been used to and taken for granted. So it's a much more complex problem, and it will take a lot of years, research, and political will to solve. We do have we have a final pair of questions because we don't have a lot of time, but I hope we can spend the next few minutes of the time here. These are somewhat connected. I don't. We have something from both for both speakers. Uh, and you might need to integrate this into your final words because this might be something along the lines of how we treat nature in this country. So as you answer, I hope you're going to give us your final words, just an open-ended, just a message for us to take away. But this might help with that contextualization. Here's the question. How do you feel about the government's focus on aestheticization or making our natural environments pretty through unnatural means? So we're looking at things like the Dolomite Beach, or resorts, or beautifying an environment, all for the sake of economic gains, but at the total disregard for for the greater good. I hope that you can answer both of those as you give your closing remarks before we turn the floor over to the rest of the AUN-EEC. But I can, if I can ask both of you to answer the question.
Okay, so let me start first. How would I look at that? It's like a bandage remedy. So it's not really addressing the issue. And it's really very controversial to say something out here, you know, so I'm really trying to pick my words. We really have to talk louder, convince, get the message across to the politician. We cannot force them. We cannot fight with them, but we can convince them. And to me, I always believe in diplomacy and talking out, making them understand the real problem and how we are going to go through solving this environmental issue, because this is very deep rooted. We cannot just simply blame the current politicians for not doing anything now, wherein the problem was, you know, going on for decades. It will also be so unfair to them. But what we can work together is we have the science, we have the knowledge, they have the power to decide and make decisions for us. Let's sit down together, push them to make the properly or the right environmental decisions. And hopefully it's easier said than done. So all of us here would have a voice. Everyone here, in whatever little ways you can promote taking care of the environment, your little actions, it will take a long, long way. Those problems are here because of the generations of our not paying so much attention to those little problems piling up together, becoming this much big. It's like the issue of global warming. It does not happen yesterday. So the solution I would see, I can see, is also like that. It's not an overnight thing that we can, you know, resolve, but it will take a change of lifestyle and a change of behavior. I think that's all I have to say. And thank you very much for all your questions and all your time.
Thank you, Dr. Linato. Dr. Malyari.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm reminded of two things. One, there was a paper in 2010 that talked about studied environmental apathy. Clinical psychologist ito. And she explored the reason for environmental apathy. Apparently, she goes in her paper, she goes, apathy comes from two words, apathos, meaning no feelings. Um, the fact the fact remains, she said, that no amount of environmental awareness can change behavior. Because in the early 1990s, in my previous incarnation, I had tons of money in Harbon Foundation to do campaigns. Hired many um, um, top ad agencies, because top of mind awareness on biodiversity was zero then. So barrage of campaigns, newspaper, magazines, and television ads. And we increased the top of mind to 0 to 1 or 4%. So hooray. But have we moved people from awareness to action? No, because again, going back to this paper, the reason for environmental apathy is that human nature is it will avoid getting hurt. Going the green way, or going the more sustainable pathway, hurts. For example, if you were to choose palm oil for your cooking, or cold press olive oil is more sustainably done, or your virgin coconut oil for frying, which will you choose? Yung less than 98 pesos per liter, or yung 300 or 400, even 500 pesos per liter. So if you go to a more sustainable source, then it will hurt. The choice between taking an old jeepney versus buying a Prius, electric, it will hurt to get the Prius, but definitely less harmful to the environment. What I'm saying is that a lot of these, we have to be circumspect also. That as Dr. Alona said, it is a transformation. That if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it cannot go from your physiological hanggang to the peak in one snap. It goes to an evolution. The second point I'd like to make is, again, the way we've structured and the way we viewed nature is something that's outdoors. We conquer nature, it's outside. But we fail to understand that nature is around us. Nature is us. We're part of nature. We are biodiversity, and biodiversity is us. I am nature, and nature is me. So because we make that dichotomy, you draw the line in the sand, and this is me and that is nature, and therefore the debate about will we save species versus poverty, and that is a wrong dichotomy. Our work, our lives are dependent on nature. We are all nature-based. We are carbon-based organisms, so we are part of nature. If we only start understanding that we are part of nature, we will protect something that we are part of. We will conserve something that we will love. And we cannot love someone or something if we don't understand it and we don't know it. So again, the last point I'd like to make is the solution for all of these is my sort of holy trinity. It starts with strong conservation science, and then improve conservation practice, and then conservation leadership, or the leaders of conservation would emerge from good conservation practice that is founded on good conservation science. So yun po, maraming salamat. Salamat sa pag-invite na sa amin this afternoon.
Maraming salamat din po, Dr. Maliari and Dr. Linato. Once again, thank you so much. And thank you for all those reminders and how complex and incredibly difficult this problem is. But I think something to nuance this as well. It's not just what we cannot love what we do not know, but we cannot love what we cannot understand, and what we cannot relate to our lives. And for that, we are going to require so much political will, knowledge, research, and a lot of understanding of things that our participants here in the Zoom room and over in YouTube for sending your comments, your suggestions, your questions. We still have a lot of questions, and we wish that we could have more time to address all these questions. Thank you to those who talked about culture, as well as those who talked about education and integrating our environment into education. Now that our conversation is over for the moment, we would like to thank everyone. Once again, we can't accommodate all of your questions and comments, but we are very grateful. Now we would like to award our certificates of appreciation to Dr. Lenato and Dr. Malyari. We're going to ask our speakers once again to turn on their cameras for documentation of this awarding. All right. So I will read out the certificates, and we'll begin with the certificate of appreciation to Dr. Neil Aldrin D. Malyari for his valuable contribution as a speaker to the webinar From Rivers to Streams, a Situationer in ASEAN Ecosystems Environmental Communication, held this day, the 12th of April, 2023, via Zoom. This is signed by Dr. Maria Asunta C. Cuyegkeng, Executive Director of the ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture. Thank you so much, Dr. Malyari.
Thank you.
And now, we also award this certificate of appreciation to Dr. Alona C. Linato for her valuable contribution as a speaker to the webinar From Rivers to Streams, a situationer in ASEAN Ecosystems and Environmental Communication, held this 12th day of April 2023 via Zoom, signed by Dr. Maria Asunta C. Cuyegkeng, the Executive Director of the ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture. Thank you as well, Dr. Linato.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to our speakers. Now, I would like to invite everyone to switch on their cameras to join us in a group photo with our speakers. I will now call on our moderators to lead us in this photo taking.
Hello, so again, I invite everyone to turn on their cameras, and there are a lot of people in this room, so this may take a little time, but I'll inform you about the progress of the screenshots. Okay, so please smile, everyone. So that's slide 1. Oops. Okay, panel 2, smile. Panel 3. Panel 4. And then one more panel. Okay, thank you, everyone.
And thank you so much to our secretariat. Thank you, everyone. We have the webinar proper has already concluded, so we'll now shift over to a few more announcements regarding the AUN-EEC's activities for this year. We might have started on a somewhat sad note on the state of biodiversity and conservation and education, but we will have a more hopeful tone because this does jumpstart what we hope to be a productive year and what we hope to be a year where we can all move forward given what we have learned today. Today's event marks the official reopening of applications and launching of the new application portal for the AUN-EEC membership to interested universities, student organizations, local government units, and non-government organizations. To discuss this application process and other upcoming events for the AUN-EEC, we have a video presentation by Dr. Emmanuel Delocado of the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, a member of the AUN-EEC Secretariat.
Hi everyone, I am Emmanuel from the Secretariat. I wish to provide 2 updates for this afternoon. First is on the reopening of the membership application of AUN-EEC, and second is regarding the upcoming activities of AUN-EEC. The first update is after 3 years, AUN-EEC is reopening the application process for membership. We are excited to have you on board as members of AUN-EEC. Who can be part of AUN-EEC? Who can be a member? We have three types of membership. Type 1, university-based academic departments and administrative offices. Type 2, student organizations from universities. Type 3, government offices, local government units, non-government organizations, private businesses, and professional groups. Membership to AUN-EEC is institutional, not individual. This is in line with membership to other networks within AUN or the ASEAN University Network. AUN believes in the power that institutions hold in enacting change, with individuals from one institution backing a particular agenda. We are pleased to share with you that membership to AUN-EEC does not require any membership fee. We only ask one thing from our members, and that is to participate in the activities of the network. Membership retention entails institutional participation in any activity, may it be the conference, webinar, or workshop hosted by the network. Who are currently part of AUN-EEC? We have members from Thai, Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. We are so appreciative of the members of our network. The institutions that you saw in the previous slides are all members of AUN-EEC, and we are honored to have them on board. If your institution is not yet part of AUN-EEC, is not part of the list we presented, then we hope you can encourage your institution to take part and be a member of AUN-EEC. Membership to the network, to AUN-EEC, has attached benefits. First is access to resources and opportunities for collaboration. Academic departments or student organizations who are looking for speakers for their particular events whose agenda is in line with AUN-EEC may request help from the Secretariat to be linked to members from other institutions who are part of AUN-EEC. Second is discounted rate in the conference, and we will talk more about the conference later. And third, exclusive access and priority registration to some events of the network. With these benefits, of course, come the responsibilities we expect our members to perform. First is attendance, to attend General Assembly and public events of the network. And second is to disseminate, to promote activities of the network to the constituents. We do send out invitation to the designated representative of the different institutions, and we hope that the representatives would disseminate the information, the invitation to the various stakeholders of the institution, may it be the students, the faculty, non-teaching personnel, and even alumni. Applying to be a member of AUN-EEC is very simple. Step 1, accomplish membership application form, and the link to the form is shown on your screen. The form would ask the institution to designate already its official representative. Step 2 is submit form via the link shown on your screen. AUN-EEC accepts membership application year-long. Step 3 is to wait. The steering committee will review the applications during the annual meeting. Even though the application portal is open year-round, there's a cutoff of January 31. For the cycle, that would be January 31, 2024. The reason behind this is every February, the steering committee convenes to plan for the next activities, to review the ongoing activities, and to review the applications. Shown on your screen right now are the links pertinent to applications. The first one being the link to the membership application form, and the second one being the submission portal. Please help us in encouraging your institutions to join AUN-EEC as members. The second update is about the upcoming events of AUN-EEC. For and reconciliation. This focus on environment is very important as we ease out of the pandemic. In the past few years, it is very understandable that the headspace, the resources, the discussions have been centered on the pressing global health issue, which is brought upon by the virus. However, as we ease out of the pandemic era, we hope to invite everyone in the region to focus on the environmental concerns that we are having, that we are experiencing, but more than that, to look on how we can restore the environment. How can we commune again with nature? This is in line with UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. We have three public activities for this year. The first one is the webinar today, which focuses on the problems that we are facing. It's our situationer. Where are we with these problems? What are the things which have been happening with our environment? And what is the state of environmental communication and education? After the lamentations from today's event, in the next one, which will happen on August 16, we hope to dialogue on the approaches on how can we address these problems. So there's a movement from lamentations to looking into the frameworks on how we can approach the issues that we presented today. That would be the AUN-EEC conference. After learning about the broad stroke approaches that we can do, we now approach it on the individual level. What changes can we make? What commitments can we make as individuals, given the things that we learned from the past two events? On October 11, we will have the AUN-EEC workshop. Allow me to zoom into closer regarding our conference. It will be an online event, a fully online event, owing to the international or regional nature of the network. It's a day-long activity, and the program is composed of plenary talks, panel discussions, and paper presentations. Even though the conference will just last for a day, we hope to provide a loaded, jam-packed, and meaningful set of activities for everyone. We also invite you to submit your abstract for oral presentation starting May 1. You may submit an abstract in any of the four themes. If you have an idea which falls under one of the four themes of the conference, please submit your abstract. First is ecology, pedagogy, and interdisciplinary, or the teaching approaches, the classroom-based approaches on how we teach ecology, and environmental reconciliation. Second is more grounded on the level of community, indigenous wisdom and stories from communities. We hope to hear stories from champions in respective communities using indigenous wisdom, indigenous knowledge, traditional practices on how we can commune with nature. Third is on innovations in communing with the environment, may it be nature-based or technology-based. And lastly, and something we're very excited about, stories and insights from student organizations mainstreaming environmental advocacies. As we want to engage the youth and as we recognize the very important role of the youth in environmental education, we hope to hear the best practices of student organizations in mainstreaming their advocacy. There is a minimal conference registration fee to this year's conference. For participants from non-member institutions, the registration fee is 500 pesos or 10 US dollars, while for participants from member institutions, the discounted rate is 200 pesos or 4 US dollars. This allows you to access the Zoom conference and you will be issued certificate of participation and the digital book of abstracts. To our existing members, we already sent the invitation for this year's General Assembly for official or designated representatives of member institutions. We hope to see you on April 26th for this year's General Assembly. Those are the two updates for reopening the membership application, and second is about the upcoming events of AUN-EEC. Let us keep in touch. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram using the handles you see on your screen or by scanning the QR code. You may also send us an email at aun.eec@ateneo.edu or visit our website for more information. Thank you for your time, and we hope to have your institution as members and to see you in our next activities.
Ines, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Thank you so much, Dr. Delocado. We invite all of you as well to stay in touch with us through the following platforms flashed on your screen. Now, before we end, we will talk about a new initiative. Last year, the AUN-EEC partnered with Arizona State University for a regional initiative on capturing the voice of the Southeast Asian youth on ecological education. For this next part, we would like to discuss this initiative called Baliktarin Mo, which will allow all those present here the opportunity to participate in the environmental cause through artwork and writing as early as now. To talk more about this initiative, we call on Ms. Jean Hardeleza Mijares, also from the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability and our AUN-EEC Secretariat.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Ines. I am very excited to share about this initiative and hope that you give me a few minutes of your time to listen and how you can participate in Baliktarin Mo, a youth-led movement for climate justice using the arts. This initiative is a local adaptation of Turn It Around flashcards for education futures, which is a global initiative that creates a card deck showcasing what changes the youth hope to see in environmental policy and education. Turn It Around cards contain an artwork on one side and a text on the other, as you see here on the screen. Last year, Turn It Around Southeast Asian edition was jointly organized by the Artist Literacies Institute, the Arizona State University, UNESCO's Future of Education Initiative, and AUN-EEC housed at the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, or AIS. This year, AUN-EEC, AIS, and other departments and units of Ateneo de Manila, supported by the Sandbox Residency Program of Areta Ateneo, are organizing Baliktarin Mo, the Philippine adaptation of Turn It Around. Anyone from the Philippines under the age of 30 and has attended any activity of AUN-EEC, AIS, and partner institutions of Baliktarin Mo, including this webinar and the other activities that Sir Eman mentioned earlier, may submit an artwork and or a piece of writing. The process of joining this has 3 phases. So there's experience, reflection, and action. First, participants will undergo an immersive learning experience. These include nature sustainability walks, workshops, webinars, roundtable discussions, and field trips. And after these activities, the participants are invited to reflect on our current environmental realities and consider whether the activity has facilitated a challenged or reinforced beliefs, guided new understandings of how the world works, evoked emotional responses, realized future actions, or has led to the articulation of hopes and dreams. And from these reflections, make artworks or written pieces. Artworks would respond to the prompts that you see here on the screen. Written works as well that will be submitted would be responding to these prompts shown on the screen. But submissions are not limited to artworks or written pieces. Participants are invited to submit outputs that promote climate action or environmental conservation using any medium that they feel can communicate best their sentiments. Remember, what is important is for us to capture the voice and the dreams of the Filipino youth for the environment. As what Dr. Alona mentioned earlier, each of us has a voice. So focus on your own insights, on your own reflections, and let your own voice be heard. Some incentives for those who will be submitting and that their works will be selected. These will be displayed in Aretef Sandbox exhibit by the end of this year, and the final deck of cards will be produced and distributed to selected schools for their use in their classrooms and to policymakers and other institutional leaders. Submissions are open now up until September 30 via the link that you see on the screen, go.ateneo.edu/baliktarinmo submission. The QR code and this link also leads to more information about this initiative, including the mechanics and the prompts that we showed earlier. Thank you very much, and we're very excited for this initiative. We hope that you will participate, and we look forward to your submissions. Over to you, Ma'am Ines.
Thank you so much, Jean, and thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of this webinar. As we draw this event to a close, we would like to ask everyone to answer our evaluation form for this event by going to the following link, the one presented on your screen, or scanning the QR code. Please be informed that only those who answer this evaluation form will be issued a certificate of participation. Once you answer this form, we will take some time to process your submission. So please allow our secretariat some days to send you your e-certificate. So again, if you would like to receive a certificate for your participation, please scan the QR code on your screen or go to the link and participate in our evaluation. And that officially wraps up our event. Once again, thank you to everyone for joining our webinar, from our speakers, to our participants, to our secretariat. We hope that you learned from our presentations and discussions, and we look forward to having you in our future events. This is Dr. Ines Ponce de Leon of the Ateneo de Manila University. On behalf of our secretariat, thank you everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
To the participants who are still in the Zoom room, we will start moving you to the waiting room as we wrap up our part here before we end the Zoom call. Thank you very much for your participation once again, and we hope to see you in the next activities of AUN-EEC.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.